can seem drunk or combative. When law enforcement in Colorado comes across one of our neighbors who's having a seizure, that officer, knowing the medical signs, can be the difference between help and permanent damage to that person's health. The Epilepsy Foundation told our Anusha Roy this is an issue they're seeing more and more these days.
For the last couple of months, Sarah Klein with the Epilepsy Foundation of Colorado started hearing about a familiar problem.
By the physician, sometimes by a family member, sometimes by the individual themselves.
They were reaching out about people who've had seizures and then got in some trouble.
Seizures can look like wandering around aimlessly. Seizures can look like just a muscle spasm. Seizures can look like staring off into space blankly. So sometimes when someone is having a seizure, it can look like, it can look like resisting arrest.
And it's not just out in public.
We suspect that a prisoner or an inmate is faking seizures.
Cheryl Trine's been involved in 2 cases with Colorado inmates who she said didn't receive the right medical care while having seizures and ended up with permanent brain damage. Trine said the problem was focused on the medical staff.
So I don't know what part of that is a lack of training versus a determined, deliberate indifference.
The Epilepsy Foundation thought their training around 7 years ago across the Front Range was comprehensive enough.
It is difficult often to know the difference between, drunk, for example, drunken disorderly behavior and actually a seizure.
Pointed towards an intoxicated person.
It's right about the time Aurora police arrested a man they thought was drunk but was actually having a seizure. Since then, every year, Aurora police go through seizure training and they don't know of any repeats of the same problem. Denver police are trained to call paramedics during a medical emergency but don't have specific epilepsy training. And in Weld County, deputies talk about it a little every year during CPR training.
We haven't done that in a number of years.
But now the foundation said maybe it's time for them to do more.
It makes us think like maybe we need to be more proactive instead of waiting for them to come and ask us.
So part of that conversation is about how this is more than just law enforcement and how some of that training maybe needs to be for other medical staff working in jails and expanding it beyond that. And the Epilepsy Foundation said they do offer that training for free, so it's available for anyone who wants to take advantage of it.
I imagine it might be difficult, Anusha, to pinpoint how often this is happening if the people in charge of keeping records often aren't sure what they're seeing.
Yeah, and even the Epilepsy Foundation were saying that, this happens occasionally. It's not like it's happening all the time. And also it pointed out that a seizure can look really different, from what we just described in this story. So what we were talking about is not the case for everyone who's living with epilepsy.
All right. Thank you, Anusha. Former Governor John Hickenlooper is getting a $500 an hour taxpayer-funded lawyer to defend him from an ongoing ethics investigation. And that money is coming from a post-9/11 economic recovery fund. That arrangement was first reported today by the Denver Post. We've now been able to independently confirm the details of this. Hickenlooper's campaign for the Democratic Senate nomination says Hickenlooper was unaware of the source of the funding for his lawyer. Ethics investigators haven't yet ruled on whether former Governor Hickenlooper violated Colorado's gift law. He accepted free jet travel from wealthy interests. Hickenlooper insists he followed the law.
We did everything. We filled out every form. We did everything right.
And Hickenlooper also says that journalists should be defending him.
You guys should be protecting me on stuff like this.
The person actually defending him is Mark Gruskin, a well-known Democratic elections attorney. It is not unusual for an official to get a taxpayer-funded attorney when facing a legal challenge for something that happened in office. What is interesting is that this money is not coming from the legal services budget. It's coming from a post-9/11 economic recovery fund. Gave cash to states to use for a variety of purposes. The current governor's office provided records indicating that Hickenlooper's attorney has billed the state $43,000 so far. If the Independent Ethics Commission rules against Hickenlooper in the end, it's likely just to be a slap on the wrist, but it's certainly going to become an issue as he's expected to take on Republican Senator Cory Gardner in one of America's most closely watched Senate races. Oh, it's coming, Denver. Impending white doom. Brace for a trace. That's it for the city. Moss in the mountains. You know the drill. The parking lot corridor is already filling up from the metro area to Vail. One round tonight, another tomorrow, which means we get to fire up the snow guns of TV news to make a little artificial excitement over this impending white doom. Here's Kathy.
Wow, do we need the moisture. It's a pain in the neck to walk in, to drive in, but every drop, every snowflake we need. And yeah, it's creating kind of a slow go out there, but notice how the roads are just wet, and that will be the case overnight and for tomorrow. We did top out in the low 50s today, hard to believe, until that cold north wind came in. A lot going on. There's the main low, which is spinning over California, bringing beneficial rain for fire managers there. Now they're worried about flooding and mudslides. A disturbance coming ahead of it crossed from the southwest, and a front from the north dove right down this morning and just brought all that cold air right into the southern plain state. So with all of this going on, what does it mean for you? Cloudy, cold for the next 36 hours, chance for rain and snow off and on between now and Friday morning. It won't be heavy snow down here. It will be heavy in the southwestern mountains, and wow, do they need it. 1 to 2 feet of snow down there with a winter storm warning posted, and that's an area that's just missed out on all of the fun with the recent pattern of late. So yeah, 36 hours is going to be soggy and wet and cold, but not enough to really impact travel on the I-25 corridor. You head west, though, and you're going to see some higher accumulation amounts. But here in Denver, an inch, maybe 2. Tonight, chilly, low 24, cloudy and cold with light snow, 1 to 2 inches. We'll have snow in the morning, a break in the afternoon, snow tomorrow night, snow Friday morning, and then clearing. And then, of course, it's Friday. And then we get you into the weekend with sunshine and 50s. Another storm coming in, another chance for snow on Monday and Tuesday. And Kyle, we have a huge fan base up in Wyoming. Who knew? Riverside, which is located about 48 miles from Walden. Apparently, they all watch and they said, hey.
Hey, folks. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
Schools are more focused than ever on keeping track of students who might be a threat to themselves or others. But what about when troubled students switch schools? Our Marshall Zellinger found gaps in the system.
The United States Secret Service recently studied 41 school violence events from 2008 to 2017. And in this report, it found 19 attackers changed schools at least once. In Colorado, school district policies differ in how and when they share a student's threat assessment when that student transfers to another school.
Right now, there's no standards for that. So if a student engages in attack-related behavior in one school, he can transfer to another school district and they'll never know.
John McDonald runs school safety for Jefferson County Schools and spent this summer pushing lawmakers to create a standard for all districts.
What would you have us do?
Republican Senator Bob Gardner sat on the school safety committee and heard that plea to legislate a student's threat assessment following them from district to district.
You know that there will be parents who rightfully so will say, I moved my child because he or she had problems adapting, and I didn't want this to follow them.
Ultimately, we don't need legislation to move forward for this to be happening. This should be happening right now.
Democratic Representative Daphne Michelson-Janae chaired that committee, and she's right. Nothing is stopping a district from doing it. So what are the districts doing? We reached out to 18 of them across the state. Adams 12, Aurora, Clear Creek, Douglas County, Inglewood, Jefferson County, and Littleton schools let the new district know about any threat assessment on a student who transfers out of their district. Denver Public Schools and Greeley-Evans do not share unless the new district requests that report. Cherry Creek and Westminster schools share a summary of that threat assessment. Boulder Valley will provide it if asked, or they'll call the district if they know where the student is going. 3 school districts in Colorado Springs share the report if the new district requests it. Mesa County Valley Schools in Grand Junction does not share the report. We're still waiting to hear back from Ellicott and Poudre schools. Even if the state legislated some of this, we're a local control state. School boards can do whatever they want. So, Kyle, the idea is maybe if there's a standard that the state recommends and it's from the bully pulpit, maybe all the districts will adopt the same standard.
Sure. They say that they are reporting, I say I work out. Not necessarily true.
I've talked with some experts in districts who say that what we've just shown may not be actually being implemented. So some districts say they do it, but they're not receiving the information. Interesting thing, if you transfer schools, if your student transfers schools and the school says, hey, we have a new student from your district, they'll send the school records. The question is, will they send these disciplinary records? But what if the school doesn't know? Or what if the new school is like, hey, maybe we should check if they have a school threat assessment, a student threat assessment? It's not a standard to be like, hey, we got John Doe. Did they do something bad?
Yeah, it goes both ways. All right. Thank you, Marshall. 3 pregnancies give birth to one big friendship.
It was almost like when you start in a college dorm and you're scoping out the other, people that live on the floor.
3 moms who needed to find each other are looking for other mothers dealing with difficult pregnancies. And the towns that are taking turkeys off the table for Thanksgiving. It's coming up on a special edition of Nest. 85% of Americans live within 10 miles of a brewery. What a time to be alive. Perhaps that is why fewer people are homebrewing these days. Perhaps also why our Steve Steger walked into his homebrew shop and saw a closing sign.
It's been kind of humbling seeing all the customers that we've made over the years.
Jamie Williams is a patient man. He has dealt with a barrage of questions over the years from a guy who knows nothing about science but decided to make his own beer. And Jamie's store, Co-Brew, opened the same year my brewing career began in 2015. I never thought he'd be calling it quits before me.
It's been, difficult, to explain why we're not going to be around.
Jamie and his wife Jana say they made the decision earlier this year when it came time for them to sign another lease on their Golden Triangle storefront. The rent was too high.
A lot of people are not homebrewing anymore.
And the demand for homebrewing supplies too low. For many reasons, Jamie says.
The availability of commercial beer has made it so that you don't have to make your own. The White Claw, younger millennial crowd has taken a bite out of it as well.
Come on, millennials. Co-Brew is the 5th homebrew shop to close in the state this year, according to the Brewers Association.
I think, the industry is at a little bit of a flex point.
Chief economist Bart Watson says a lot of homebrewers are getting their supplies online. And he says good economic times are actually bad for brewing at home.
You generally see more entry into home brewing when the economy slows down a little bit. People have a little bit more time on their hands. They might get more interested in making their own products.
Meanwhile, the shelves at Co-Brew are emptying fast. But Jamie Williams is still holding on to something.
When we started this, I wanted that to be a big part of our mission, and it has been. I mean, we have a lot of good friends now.
For Next, I'm Steve Steger.
Bart Watson from the Brewers Association up in Boulder says that homebrew stores might look to independent bookstores as a model. Because I think back a decade ago, bookstores were supposedly doomed, right? Then they started to innovate and change, added new features and programs, and now a lot of indie bookstores are thriving. The most Colorado thing we've seen today is the familiar family of turkeys down in Ouray. You will see them all over town, sometimes using the crosswalk, sometimes not. For the 3rd year in a row, Tina, the turkey, her mate Ricky, and all their youngins have been pardoned by the city. Tina was first seen in Ouray in 2016. Ricky came along a year later, and now they're part of the fabric of that small town. Erie is also making special accommodations for turkeys this Thanksgiving. Whole town's invited to a vegan Thanks and Giving dinner next week at the Love and Arms Animal Sanctuary. Sanctuary says they want to help people appreciate, not just eat, the turkeys. They've got 5 ladies there, each named for a type of tea, and 1 gentleman, Walter.
We think that when people get the chance to meet them and hear their personalities and stories, it'll really help them empathize with them and see them more as sentient beings who have their own lives and personalities.
Animal Sanctuary says they got about 10 spaces left for the dinner, so if you want to hang out with Walter and the ladies for a vegan Thanks and Giving, go to the link in the next section of 9news.com. 3 moms shared their difficult pregnancies and found comfort in each other's stories.
And so we really cheered each other on.
They shared their word from mom to mom. And you all got a little excited last night when we asked you to come up with a new state motto. Here are some of the few hundred replies we received. Women who became mothers together, who spent restless time on bed rest together while their babies were in the children's NICU together, got back together 3 months later so that they could share encouragement for other families that will one day find themselves in a similar situation.
This is Clay Kanemoto, and this is Kai.
This is Mabel. This is Liam. Liam Sullivan.
This guy was IUGR, so he had some growth restrictions while in utero. And this little guy, Kai, had a heart defect.
She was born September 11th. Her actual due date, though, would have been this week. It was about my 20-week ultrasound that I got some pretty devastating news that Liam had spina bifida.
Staying here day after day for 63 days was hard.
It was terrifying. If you're not expecting to spend the, last part of your pregnancy, it wasn't really what I had in mind.
But you get so close with the doctors and the nurses, and two of the great friendships I made with Heather and Katie.
To have someone else going through a similar situation is everything. These guys were great, and we immediately, started to connect with each other. We're all in the same boat. So I think relationships are huge when you're going through an isolating, scary experience.
Although we didn't always say a whole lot to each other, we completely knew how one another felt.
I think the biggest thing is to really just rely on your supports and just lean into what's going on. If you're going through something that feels life-altering, like with your child, to absolutely reach out.
You can do it. You have no idea what you can actually do until you're put in that position.
You just get to know people on a whole other level.
The stories of Elizabeth Kanemato, Heather Guthrie, and Katie Sullivan. The fetal surgeon for all three of the newborns said each will have separate challenges, though all of them should do well. Your final word tonight is about why homebrewing is a dying art, and you might just be right. Those were some of our best fake new Colorado mottos yet. Anna writes in with a criticism about the idea of school districts sharing those threat assessments, saying that requiring schools to do that as policy, Anna says, is racist, classist, and fuels the school-to-jail pipeline. A note from Kurt Greeley, who says, unfortunate when homebrew shops close. Luckily, he says, I live close to what I think is the best one in town, the Brew Hut. I happened in there 12 years ago, and those guys taught me how to homebrew. I don't do it very much anymore because I'm terrible at it. See you next time.